Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Hello, Michael. How are you this evening?
Hey, Barry. I'm still here, so I'm good. How are you?
I am still here as well after Idalia, and I'm excited to talk to you about more media theory.
Yeah, tonight we are talking about Bruno Latour's On Network Theory. A few clarifications is the name of the essay, and I am, as we like to say around here, full of beans about this, in the sense that I just think that this is a really natural and wonderful place for the podcast to reach, because I think that the ideas that sort of shape actor network theory are a really good fit for where we've been, and I imagine where we may go, wherever that may be. The network will come with us.
Come with us.
So yeah, no, I think it's good. You know, we've spent a lot of time, as you and I have talked about, we spent a lot of time on theory, 19th century, early 20th century, all the way up to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I feel like actor network theory is a logical next step for what we've been talking about, that really enables us to continue the discussions we've been having, but kind of get to some new places, or else possibly even clarify some of the other discussions we've had. So I think it's an important discussion to have. Full disclosure, I am a Latour fanboy. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. Is there anything you wanted to add before we jump in?
Well, I was thinking one reason why we're both excited to talk about this is that usually I don't think we feel this is necessarily heavy labor, but oftentimes we have to do a little bit of work to sort of, at the end of an episode, to say, well, we've been talking about the 1920s and a darn fine job we've done of the 1920s. Or we've been talking about 1865 and photography and a darn good job we've done. But what does this have to do with critical media studies? What does this have to do, for example, with with digital culture?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had to do, extra work. Now I think we've enjoyed doing this, but hasn't been necessarily onerous, but we've always had to sort of perform that labor. We don't have to do that now, because one way, although, it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing, I'm looking forward to learning what Dr. Rapici thinks about the close fit between actor network theory and contemporary digital culture. So I think that's, whether or not it's the close or closest fit is something we'll probably end up discussing. But it is clear that in this case, in talking about Latour, and I think this is part of the reason for your beans, is that we don't have to jump into the digital age.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about Latour that is, fully cognizant of, and he's thinking within, even though he often wrote about historical examples that predate the digital era. There is something about new actor network theory that seems to be peculiarly suited, or seems to be very much product of the digital age.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And I think without any further ado, we can get to the essay. I'll just do the slightest bit of scene setting, and to say that Latour made an entry in the Norton Anthology of Theory and Criticism for works he did on postmodernism, why we've never been modern,
Postmodern, or never been modern.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
So he made his entry as a post-structuralist. He seemed to fit to be the latest example of a post-structuralist theory. If that's the role he played a French thinker after structuralism, after Derrida, more contemporary than Derrida, and offering a kind of fresh post-structuralist approach, or that's how he was sort of categorized. But actually, there is a way in which the comparison, and certainly Bruno Latour makes this very clear in his work, um, while informed by, say, semiotics and also the critique of semiotics and structuralism, certainly very cognizant of post-structuralism, Latour is not really Derrida mini-me, or even engage with Derrida's project, Heidegger, relative. I think it's fair to say that Derrida, whatever Derrida was doing, there was a way in which it was engaged with the phenomenological project, the Husserlian project, the Heideggerian project. And that's never been Bruno Latour's cup of tea. He was always first and foremost, and I just want to bring this up simply because it resonates with listeners who may have heard or our episodes on Jacques Ellul. The closest analog, I think, to Latour is not Jacques Derrida or Gilles Deleuze or Baudrillard, the French post-structuralist thinkers that we've discussed on critical media studies. I think if you really want to get a handle on Latour, you might want to reacquaint yourself with Jacques Ellul, and who was another sort of moral, philosophical critic of the ideas that were driving technology. And he's a historian of science, in the same way that Ellul was very interested in the history of technology and the history of science. And actor network theory is primarily developed to solve the problems, the intellectual problems that Latour had, because he was a historian of science. And he wanted to explain how science worked. And out of that comes actor network theory.
So I want to ask you a couple questions about this. The title of the article is On Actor Network Theory, a few clarifications, and we'll dig into a couple sections
Sure.
as we make our way through this. But as I read it, and this isn't to spill the beans, so to speak, but as I read it, he's basically got a couple.
Are there Latour spoilers?
There are spoilers, but I will do my best to divulge little.
No.
So the clarifications, his argument is largely that actor network theory, and I believe this is written in mid 90s, right? Like is 96?
No, I think it's a little bit later. Well,
okay, so this was written sometime between 1990, 1995, 96. I don't have an exact date, but the purpose, I think what he's doing here, obviously is made clear in the title, On Actor Network Theory, a few clarifications. So he's trying to really situate ants in the public consciousness, or at least the academic consciousness, in ways that differentiate itself from the way that we might usually use these terms otherwise. And so it's a complicated essay in the sense that he's making distinctions that force us to re-understand. And so this is totally off script here. I haven't prepped Barry for this at all. But I just want to read you two quick opening sentences from the early part of this essay where we get to what he's talking about. And you can respond to these as you'd like. So
sure.
He's saying three misunderstandings are due to common usages of the word network itself and the connotations they imply. So what we're going to try and do today, I'm jumping all over the place here, I'm sorry, but what we're going to try and do today is really understand what he means by network, what he means by actor. And then once we've understood what an actor and what a network is,
what would a theory that accommodates an actor and a network?
That would be it. So we're literally going to take the pieces apart. We're going to take it apart and rebuild it. So
Can I just add something to what you just said? Just sort
absolutely.
of build on it. Yeah, so that's the episode. That's our episode. That is our episode, and we're sticking to it. We're going to try to clarify what we're going to try to explain his clarification of what an actor means, what a network means, and then how he thinks the theory with the properly calibrated definition of an actor and a network, what that theory would, what are its affordances? What would it allow you to do? And we should just a final thing to say about the context of the essay. Clearly, the term was being used after his presentation or his writings, or perhaps the writings of a fellow historian of science, John Law. So people started talking about actor network theory, and they were talking it down. They were saying, I don't understand what he means by actor. I don't, the problem is everybody thinks they know what actor means. And everybody thinks they know, especially in the digital age, what a network means. And really, this essay is Latour's attempt to say, you know, I think you're thinking about both of these terms in ways that are limiting and
Mhm.
that do not allow me to do the kind of study and analysis that I'm trying to do.
I think that's well said. I think that's well said. So as he says it, so he's talking the misunderstandings are due to common usages of the word network itself and the
Right, right,
connotations they imply. So as we've said, this is a matter of not understanding the language in the way that he is now using it, and therefore
right.
misunderstanding the theory as the language gets put together.
Well
He
put.
says, the first mistake would be to give it, network, a common technical meaning in
Mhm.
the sense of a sewage or train or subway or telephone network. Recent technologies have often the character of a network, that is, of exclusively related yet very distant elements, with the circulation between nodes being made compulsory through a set of rigorous paths, giving to a few nodes a strategic character. Stop. How do you understand that?
Um, I think one of the things that's going on there, though I would like to your help in
Mm-hmm.
explaining what he means by nodes, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll just take a quick pass on it. One of the things that he's worried about in the common meaning of the word network that I think he wants to move away from is this idea that a network is a static tool, is a tool with no dimensions. It's a one dimensional, it's an object. And that we tend to define objects and understand objects in a very static, non living way.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things he's trying to do is liven up our understanding, broaden, and particularly make us understand the ways in which the network, rather than being a dead piece of technology, is alive, is a living thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things I think is going on.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. He's talking about, and I think by what he means of nodes, like if you think of his examples of the train, the
Mm-hmm.
subway, or the telephone, if you
Mm-hmm.
have a network, right, this is a connection among various nodes or train stations or subway stops or
Right,
telephone
right, right,
users.
right, right,
And
right, right.
the important thing to note in this, and he talks about this, right? This is compulsory. You do not have a choice to participate in the network or not. You are into a network. You have been written into a network. You have been placed in a network. You serve this particular function, and your performing that function keeps the network active and functioning well.
Well,
Right.
Michael, I want to ask you a question here
Mm-hmm.
too, while you bring it up. Um, that strikes me as wrong. So tell me how it's right. Here's what strikes me as wrong about that.
Okay.
No,
No, you're
not
good.
what
You're
you're
good.
saying. Not what you're saying. What Latour says, saying it's not self-evidently right to me. Here's what I mean. I mean, um, this idea that we cannot escape the network. If I don't get on the train, I'm not part of the network.
No,
Doesn't
it's
he
not.
mean
But
that
that's
if
the
I'm in,
point. That's the
no,
point. You are not. I don't think, according to his, as I understand this, the network is a construction that is the result of human intention, right?
Yes.
That
Right.
exists in a static, in a place. This is, so if you put the network, in this particular location,
Mhm.
that's where the network is. You
Mhm.
would utilize the network for whatever your particular purpose was. If you want to make a phone call, you're going to get into the phone network, but you're not bound to it at all. It is a,
So I can't, well, you're agreeing with me. I can't escape it.
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I
Right.
thought he said though, but didn't you just say that he said you can't escape the network? We have no choice. Did
Recent
I
tech.
misunderstand?
Well, okay. The first mistake would be to give it a common technical meaning in the sense of a sewage, train, subway, or telephone network. Recent technologies often have the character of a network, that is, of exclusively related yet very distant elements, with the circulation between nodes being made compulsory, i.e., clearly and inexplicably defined. You can't go, if you're using the network, you are
Mhm.
confined to the network
Yeah.
and the choices available within the network
So
through a
the
series of
escape
rigorous paths.
inescapable. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying through a series of rigorous paths, giving few nodes a strategic character, i.e.,
Yeah.
everything in the network does what it is supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
And you can't, I guess instead of saying you can escape the network, but you can't violate the network. Whatever the network's
If I'm in the network, it's I'm existing on its terms. That's what the inescapability means.
yes. In other words, if you get on the subway, you
I'm on the
can't
subway. Yeah.
decide
Yeah.
where you want that subway to take you unless where you want that subway to take you is the next stop.
Is our yeah. Yeah. So it is about upon entering the network. This is important for your next bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're I'm glad we had this sub whatever
Yeah.
discussion thread. Glad we had this thread because it's kind of preparing us for the next part of the next key term. Part of the inescapability of the network comes from the fact that when I enter the network, I am losing some of my agency as a human.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, I can't get on the subway train and say I'm going to the Bronx and then all of a sudden say, no, I don't want to go to the Bronx. I want to go to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how the network is working.
No, no.
So my agency is constrained by the pre-existing nodes, the nodes of the network that I've entered into.
I think that's right. All right. So he carries on a little bit further down the second section. And he says, a network. So he's finishing up with network here. A network in mathematics or in engineering is something that is traced or inscribed by some other entity, right? So the network that he's talking about with the subway, that's built by something other than the subway, right? Um,
Sure.
the mathematician or the engineer. An actor network is an entity that does the tracing and the inscribing. It is an ontological definition and not a piece of inert matter in the hands of others, especially of human planners or designers. It was in order to point out this essential feature that the word actor was added to it. So let's finish up with the network before he jumps network here. So his argument here is that our traditional understandings, correct me if I'm wrong, our traditional understandings of network or network, excuse me, are human made, largely static, predefined, and once you're in that network, they are limiting. Do we want to add anything else?
I mean, I think what the additional point that he was limbing there was this idea that, yes, I mean, that what you said is right.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the additional point that Latour was making is that to get a theory, we can't just stay with a network. We have to be able to encompass, we have to be able to include the element that traces the network,
Right.
that outlines the network, which is different from necessarily the producers of the network, but that there is always this sort of human, there is a human element.
To the
I mean,
traditional network.
well, networks don't have humans in it, right? It's just a network.
Mhm.
I sort of understood this as that. Whoo.
No, no, you're right. I'm sorry. I was jumping the gun there a little bit. The traditional conception of network that he's trying to work away from
Mm-hmm.
is the result of human intention, but it is a non-human thing because he's not talking about social networks here. He's talking about
Right.
networks in terms of like routes that are clearly defined, that serve predetermined purposes. And I think his argument here with the actor network is that rather than being traced out by an external agent, that the actor network theory, he says, an actor network is an entity that does the tracing and inscribing. It is an ontological definition and not a piece of matter in the hands of
Right.
others.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was the thing that was the part of the passage you read that I was trying to describe. It failed miserably. Let me try and do it a little bit better. The problem with network theory, among the traditional notions of a network, is that it doesn't include the element of the agent that limbs the network, that describes the network, that outlines the network. So we have to introduce the human. And this is basically a segue to the next part of actor network theory, which is in order to explain, you're going to have to introduce what an actor means. Now, notice that he's nervous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, you can see that you can see the torsions that poor Bruno Latour is going through. His key terms, he really wants us to have a completely new understanding of what the terms mean. And so he says, I'm doing actor network theory, but he also is saying you don't understand what a network is and you don't understand what an actor is. So the first thing you have to understand about a network is that a network is human in a way, because to really describe a network, you're going to have to include the element, which is traditionally the human element, that outlines the network. But at the same time, and we're going to see this when you read the actor bit, he doesn't want to just recreate the subject object distinction and say, there's a network and it's dead. But there's a human agent who outlines the network and they're great. I love them. So he's going to have to introduce the actor. And at the same time, he wants to say, the actor is not the grand human agent. Now, I'm getting in advance of the things you're going to talk about in a second, but just a quick précis. He has to bring in the actor because for him, the actor is the network. You can't really separate the actor and the network. So, because part of the network is the ability to trace the network. But to do that, you have to bring in the human, the agent, the actor. But he doesn't want that actor to be the grand human actor who is like a god within the system.
Right.
As you'll explain.
So the next section. Now, the word actor has been open to the same misunderstanding as the word network. Actor in the Anglo-Saxon tradition is always a human, intentional individual actor.
Just stopping you right there. Anglo-Saxon tradition. This is a French historian of science. You know you're effing up. You know that he thinks we're effing up. Once he says it's an Anglo-Saxon word, you know we're in trouble. Anglo-Saxon readers, man, we're going to have it. He's going to let us have it. That's all I'm saying.
In the Anglo-Saxon tradition is always a human,
wrong,
intentional individual actor and is most often contrasted with mere behavior.
Wrong.
Right. If one adds this definition of an actor to the social definition of a network, then the bottom of misunderstanding is reached. An individual human.
We're a double effed up because as he was saying earlier,
right.
He didn't like the social definition of a network.
No. He's trying very hard to get away from that.
Right. So if you just bring in the Anglo-Saxon actor into it, you are going to mess it up. It's going to be a bad stew, and it's not going to be a Latour stew.
No. We don't want that stew.
We don't want that stew.
If one adds this definition of an actor to the social definition of a network, then the bottom of misunderstanding is reached. An individual human, usually male, who wishes to grab power makes a network of allies and extends his power, doing some network or liaising, as the Americans say. Alas, this is the way Ant is most often represented,
And
which
it's
is
so wrong.
here, which is about
So
as
wrong.
accurate as saying that the night sky is black because the
Oh
astrophysicists
my
have shown there is a big black hole in it. He says, to help get us all on the right path.
Let's
An
get on the right
actor
path now.
in
Okay, we know
Ant.
what's wrong, right? Let's try to briefly summarize what's wrong.
Sure.
Now you're going to tell me, and now we're going to, and Latour is going to tell us, and we'll explicate what is the right thing. But let's see if we can very briefly, just for ourselves, let's summarize what's the bad idea of a network that he wants to knock out of knock
Well, I think
out of
right
the
his
park.
his argument against the conception of actor that dominates
Uh-huh.
is that
Uh-huh.
again it is a intentional male.
Intentional agent, right? Usually, and male in the sense that male, the patriarchal
Yeah, that's what I mean by
understanding
that.
of male. Yeah, the patriarchal understanding that men are the actants, right? And
Right.
that's what he wants to do away with.
But that the actor is human with intention and
And their intention goes.
right, and the means to act
They're,
on that, right? So
yeah, right.
so
Right.
he says an actor in Ant is a semiotic definition.
Okay,
And
so what does that mean,
hold
Michael?
on. An
Okay.
actant, that is
Yes.
something that acts or to which activity is granted by others. It implies no special motivation of human individual actors, nor of humans in general. An actant can
Right.
literally be anything, provided it is granted to be the source of an action. Right.
Right.
And this is really, really
So
against the grain.
So, a couple things there. Number one, a semiotic act, the actor is an agent only in the semiotic sense. What that means, here he is showing his Gallic philosophy heritage. Um, this is going back to structuralism, this idea that there's no essential identity to the actor. It's just that the system, there's a differential system. The differences in language create meaning. So it's just the differences. There's not an essential meaning to a word. Words mean, according to structuralism, according to semiotics, not because trees are really trees. The word tree is the object. It's just that tree is not P. Tree is not me. There is a difference in the signifier that's creating a meaning, but it's differential. The meaning is not essential, it's just differential. So, number one, there is no essential actor. Nobody has heroic qualities. And the other big mind F that's going on, you already said it, is the idea that in this system, and if if the agent has their agency only by differential means, only through according to semiotics, that means objects could be agents as much. According to the system, if the system assigns the object and not the grand Anglo-Saxon male, if the system, the network, assigns agency to the technology, to the object, then it's the agent.
So would we say then that because he said earlier, right, that the network in actor network theory does the inscribing, right? The network here is
an assemblage, right?
right.
It's the human agent plus the network.
So in other
One
words,
thing.
though, but the degree to which an individual actant is granted agency, is granted the ability to what's the language he uses? An acting provided is grant to be the source of an action. That's the action that an actant is able to undertake is defined or enabled by the construction of a network at any given point.
certainly would be a factor in it if I understand what you're saying, right?
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily, again, it's, I mean, the subway example you gave, I'm seeing a lot of valences or uses for it, because think about the ways in which your agency is limited by getting on the subway train, right?
Mhm.
And there are certain options and possibilities that you just simply can't ask for. And in fact, it would be insane to ask for. Once you're going to the Bronx, you're not going to go to Paris. If it's a New York train system, you're not going to go to London.
Right.
If it's a London train system, you're not going to go
So
to New
what's
York.
fascinating about this, I'm glad you brought that up. What's fascinating about this is that, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a fan of actor network theory, um, as a way of really achieving a different perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
His new model of networks and actors
Mm-hmm.
is not incompatible with the traditional model of networks, in the sense that the two can exist in the same place. We've just talked about the subway, both as the traditional result of human intention static network.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if we look at the exact same situation through actor network theory,
Mm-hmm.
we see that the subway car, for example, instead of being a passive node, perhaps, or a passive, right
Right. It's not a
now,
passive node.
it's no longer passive.
It's telling you what to do in a way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's telling you what to do without speaking. It is circumscribing your agency. It is telling you, in a sense, it is limiting your possibilities and also enabling your possibilities. But
Exactly.
you're doing neither. You're
Mhm.
doing neither. You're neither the agent who's enabling the possibility or the one who's limiting it.
No,
You're
you are
accepting limitation.
you are at this point in time
Right.
a part of this network that
Correct.
does not
Right.
that counter to our natural impulses in terms of how we think of these things, does not have the dominant position in the network.
Exactly.
Right? You are along, but as you continue to exist within the network, and as the network is configured, it brings other actors into what he calls elsewhere socialization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your role is continually being refined, and like your role in the network as you get off the train at the next stop,
Mm-hmm.
you have a moment in that network to now act, right? Not to control the network, but to act within the network. And your presence on or off that subway is going to ever so slightly redefine the network. So this is kind of the cool thing that separates. And this is what he means, I think, by it is continually inscribed, right? Like every time an actor acts, the network shifts ever so subtly and is redefined and traces a slightly different image of the network and what that network does. Let's move on just a little bit to the next stop, because I think this is going to give us a chance that we're really.
The next stop, where did you do that on
Oh
purpose?
boy, that was. I'll be here all night,
That
folks.
on purpose?
No, God, it's late. If
Anyway,
a criticism can be leveled at Ant, it is, on the contrary, its complete indifference for providing a model of human competence. And this is what we were just talking about. There is no model of human actor in Ant, nor any basic list of competences that have to be set
yeah,
at the
right,
beginning,
right.
because the human, the self, and the social actor of traditional social theory is not on
Isn't
the
here.
agenda.
It isn't on the agenda, right?
So Barry, he
I
asks,
I hope okay.
Bruno asks, Barry, so
Yeah.
what is on the agenda? The attribution of human, unhuman, non-human, inhuman characteristics, the distribution of properties among these entities, the connections established between them, the circulation entailed by these attributions, distributions, and connections, the transformation of those attributions, distributions, and connections of the many elements that circulate, and of the few ways through which they are sent.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Um, a few comments, or at least one comment. Am I allowed a comment here,
Yeah,
or do you mind?
please, go
I'll
to town.
start. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I sensed you were about to say
No.
something.
I wanted to see what you think of this, because I think
Uh,
this is, I wanted
this
to
is
get
kind of
that bit
key.
out. because
Yeah.
this, I think, is where we just were with our subway example.
Yes, indeed. Indeed it is. Indeed and that's what I was going to remark, that in a way what he wants to make possible, what actor network theory wants to do, or what the aim of actor network theory is, to make it possible to to think about the agency of the subway car. Really.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can think of the agency of the objects, you have necessarily displaced a traditional notion of the actor as a human agent with intentions, wills, and aims that they inscribe passive, manfully upon a passive object. So that was the first thing. Um, that was the first thing I wanted to comment on, is that the subway car, I'm seeing the subway train car here. I'm seeing it becomes the new hero.
Mm-hmm.
Except, and this is the second point, it's not the new hero. The the thing that the passage, the hope of the system, the hope that Latour has for actor network theory, according to this passage, is this idea that there are multiple actors. This theory will allow you for the first time to describe a multiplicity of agencies, and the network as a dynamic system that is changing moment by moment, as opposed to a static system that you outline. This is a kind of living, dynamic organism. And just notice the grammar of the sentences you were reading. Is what is on the agenda? The attribution of human, unhuman, non-human, the subway car, not excluding, it's interesting, not excluding the human, right?
No,
But it's just
it's the
not
first term he
privileged.
uses.
It's the first term it uses, but it's not privileged either.
No.
Right? It's not privileged. And it's in a crowd. The human is in a crowd of nouns. Okay, number one. The distribution of properties, the connections established, the circulation entailed, the distributions, connections, things like this. There is a sense that the system is going to be redistributed, recirculated, at any given moment. The system there can be a redistribution of elements or of energies, a recirculation of elements, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you. We'd start, you were talking
Are
earlier.
you going to let what I say stand? Do you think that was okay? Was that
Well,
all
I'm
right with
coming
you?
back at you.
Oh no, you don't like it. Okay,
No, it's a
go
question,
for it. Go for it.
and it has to do again with his background. You had
Mhm.
likened Latour. You had made a connection between Latour and Ellul, and I'm wondering, as scientific minds, I'm wondering if we can look, if you feel that we can look at Ant in its mission to decenter human intentionality, right? Not to get rid of it. He's not pushing humans or human desire out of the equation.
No, because that is a factor among that is a one of the characteristics of the network.
Right. But he's
Right.
he's leveling the network, we could say, or he's leveling
Absolutely.
the role of the
Absolutely.
actors in the network. And
Absolutely.
he's making very clearly making space for unhuman, non-human, inhumans, right? Is this, I guess, again, I'm having a hard time phrasing this with anything that would come across as eloquent. Is this a means of getting more scientific? Does this enable us to see relations or just the world around us?
Well, about modern science, and the idea of the modern scientific project is really kind of important, really kind of crucial to Latour's, his research agenda and to
Mm-hmm.
his identity as a scholar. When you think about modern science, if I had to come up with a soundbite to explain the modern scientific outlook, I would say that science it seems to be that, its major attribute in modern times has been displacing the human, saying that we are not as important, or are either science has questioned the ability of our bodies to take adequate measurements and make adequate representations of the world, or it has, in astronomy and in astronomy, it has told us that it has informed us that we are no longer, our planet is no longer the center of the heavens.
I think
Yeah,
I think
right.
that was a really good. I think the body was a really good example, right? Like this is to me
Mhm.
in a sort of a coarse way of seeing this. This is the difference between I'm going to cure my illness by bleeding myself versus
Mhm.
I'm going to see how my body as an entity distinct from consciousness, distinct from intentionality, manages what's going on. This
And you study the body in a very particular way. You study the ways in which and it's going to sound a little bit like, the paragraph you just read. You're going to be interested in the connections established between elements, the distribution of properties, the circulation entailed by these attributions, right?
yeah, medicine's a
That's how you
fantastic
do medicine. That's
that's
how
a
you do
fantastic
medicine.
explanation of that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, yes, in a word, and I just was adding to that the fact that, I mean, why wouldn't he think this way? Because he's a historian of modern science, and modern science has always been about displacing the human. It's always been about unsettling human egotism and
Mhm.
human presumption that we are the center of the universe, and that we intuitively understand uh, our bodies, nature, what have you. Phenomenon.
Right. Man, we can go so many places with this now. Shall we return to the text so lest we
Yeah, we shall. Is there anything else you wanted to say about I guess what we just did there, just to try and put a pin on it. What we just did there is say we try to explain what the theory is, or what's the purpose of having a theory that uses and defines actors and networks in this new way. I guess
Mhm.
that's what we were doing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what he was trying to do in that particular paragraph. And so let's move on to his last section. When we'll read another sort of resonant passage and see if we can gloss it here. Okay. There is no difficulty in seeing, after I've written this essay, making a few clarifications on the actor and network theory. Now, that's really, let me say this before I read it. Now I realize how modest and how ironic that title is. A few clarifications. Well, he just basically said, you Anglo-Saxon numbskull, you don't know what a subject is, you don't know what an actor is, you don't know what a network is. I mean, these few clarifications, I mean,
They're,
they're effing big.
yeah, they're profound.
They're profound. So uh, I wonder if there's a similar sort of hint of irony in this formulation. There is no difficulty now in seeing, well, there probably is if I'm still an Anglo-Saxon numbskull.
We'll do our best though.
There is no difficulty in seeing that Ant is not about trace networks, but about a network tracing activity.
And
Let
that
me.
gets us that's medicine again, right? That's understanding how medicine as an example. That's understanding
It is
how watching the network function and change. That's yeah, okay. That's
beautifully put, and also it nicely dovetails back to the initial point that you were reading, because um, network tracing activities. Yes, there is an agent involved in this.
mhm.
There's a doctor in medicine, but that doctor, it doesn't make any sense to talk about the doctor, despite the heroic agency that
Well,
doctors want to have. It doesn't make, well, let me just finish the
yeah, yeah.
sentence. It doesn't make any sense, and see if you agree with it. It doesn't make any sense to say, I explain medicine by looking at what doctors do, right? that doesn't make any, that's not a theory. That's not a helpful theory,
No, it's not a helpful theory. It's a way of doing it, but it's
but
not a
it's a
helpful
way of
way of
doing
doing
it.
it. And I think that in this
Right.
situation, what you
Right.
have is if
Mhm.
you have the doctor is watching the body as the body, he's watching that network trace its paths. And that, so in one sense, the doctor is external to the network. He's,
But yeah, that's the
but,
point I was trying to make.
but
But
in another sense, the
yeah,
doctor is able
yeah,
to join the network, act on the network, but he can't, or she cannot define the network and is
that's it. That's it.
incapable of
That's it.
really asserting dominance over the network, because
That's what I was
any
trying to
action that
assert.
the doctor takes
Yeah,
is just going to alter the configuration of the network, form a
that's
new network.
yeah.
And so it is through, I guess what you would say, in a way, we can look at medicine and the development of medicine as the human intentionality poking at the network and then hopefully
Well
learning
put.
from the network.
Well put. Rather than
I feel like we
agency.
need the game operation now to fully.
Well, that was a brilliant. That's what I was trying to get at when I was saying if you just look at it, but you explained it so much better. That's what I was trying to get at when I said if you just look at the doctor, you can't explain medicine, but you explain why you did that much better than
But
I
yeah, and the
probably
reason
did.
the reason I wanted to interject is because it's
Yeah,
not that the doctor is necessarily internal or external or a
right.
part of or separate from the network. It's
They're
going
both.
to be the doctor's repeated insertions into the network
Sure,
that's
sure.
going in this case. So, and that I think is where his
Right.
argument about, look, the network's going to trace itself. And as we interfere, we can create, hopefully in the case of medicine, predictable outcomes. But as we know, that's not a
Mhm.
guarantee. And that's his point, because there's always actors in there. There's always different actors there.
Before I continue reading, though, I wanted to return to another thing you said because I think I wanted to sort of underscore it. I thought it was you used a perfect phrase that really is clarifying for me. You talked about, I mean, I think this is what Latour is trying to do to the idea of the agency of the agent. You used a phrase, or I think your phrase was something like, what humans do, what the human agent does is poke.
Mm-hmm.
Their intentionality pokes at the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Instead of having agency, the agent having control over the system, there is intentionality, there is agency, but it's more like you're poking the system. You're trying to interrupt it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Well,
It's
any
that kind of understated view of agency. It's more like a poke.
Well, that's it though. Any engagement with the network is going to disrupt it, right? And
Yeah,
just not
right.
not disrupt it in the sense of knock it over, but it's going to
No,
alter it.
but disrupted in the sense of altering, and that's another crucial point. That number one, in a sense, that does say that agents, that claim, which
Mm-hmm.
you just said is really kind of crucial. Anything that disrupts the network is an agent.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, agents matter because agents disrupt. But look at what you just said. The subway, and let's go back to the subway car. Let's say the subway train. I just saw the taking of Pelham 123, so this is on my mind. Let's say the subway train malfunctions for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. In that system, in that network, the subway train is the agent that disrupted the system, right? The technology disrupted the system.
Well,
So it's a
it would
subject too.
depend. It would depend on. No, I disagree with that actually.
Uh-huh.
It would depend on why the train malfunctioned, and the disruption would actually not be the train proper. It would be whatever part. See, this is one of the things about these networks with active network theory, I think, that's
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
is it is perpetually, it is infinitely divisible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not that the car disrupted the network, it's
Oh,
that
it
the
isn't.
wheel disrupted the network. The
Oh,
wheel
you would. All right.
is
All
a
right.
part of the,
Go
and
on.
the wheel is a part of the network that is car. But
Mm-hmm.
as things from a human perspective go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
all that's happening is different actors in the network are revealing themselves or revealing their agency in the network at this moment. Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no, but it's fascinating because you can so then was it the wheel? Well, no, it wasn't the wheel. It was actually the bolt in the wheel. So you can continually drill down
Mhm.
to see the inner workings of not just the network, but the portion of the network. And you realize that portion of the network is its own network. And we can go, I mean, you can drive yourself insane with this.
Well, my general point, the point that I was trying to make is that anything in which I think you were agreeing with in that last bit, that anything can be an agent.
Yes. Yes.
Anything can be an agent. But I loved I take that as a friendly amendment because I loved your emendation is that even the wheel might not be the real agent. It might be
Mhm.
something even smaller than the wheel, let alone it's not the human.
Which
Maybe it isn't the wheel. Maybe it's a part. Maybe it's
from a scientific perspective is ideal.
is you're getting precision. You're getting accuracy of description, which is
Right.
what you
Right.
want, right? No, so the ability to make that kind of micro differentiation, right?
Mhm.
That's what you wanted in a scientific method. Okay, I was supposed to read this, wasn't I? Let me start again. There is no difficulty in seeing that ANT is not about trace networks, but about a network tracing activity. As I said above, there's not a net and an actor laying down the net, but there is an actor whose definition of the world outlines, traces, delineates, describes, files, lists, records, marks, or tags a trajectory that is called a network. This is, I think, like kind of the clarifying point. No net exists independently of the very act of tracing it, and no tracing. I, I almost want to say this sentence is like this is the golden moment.
This is his
Right?
articulation of
This
network
is
theory,
his
of actor network
this
theory.
this might be his finest articulation of it, right? And it fittingly at the close. So there's no net that exists independently of the very act of tracing it. There's an agent that's
Mm-hmm.
able to trace it. There are doctors in medicine, but there is no tracing that is done by an actor exterior to the net. A network is not a thing, but the recorded movement of the thing, which needs an actor. The question and addresses now have changed. Now that you silly Anglo Saxons have understood the Gallic, have had an infusion of Gallic knowledge. The questions and addresses now have changed. It is no longer whether a net is representation or a thing, an object, a part of society or a part of discourse or a part of nature, but what moves and how this movement is recorded. In reading that aloud with you, Michael, I have a new understanding of. I mean, I'm getting a sense of how finely wrought, especially the conclusion of this essay, because look at it's beautifully precise and beautifully concise right here. What's actor network theory entail? It entails something that moves and something that records the movement.
Right.
That's
Well, and
beautiful.
I think that's it, right? Like
Beautiful.
any sort of agency that is acted upon by an actor in the network is going to be made visible because that agency will manifest itself in the network. And the second that it becomes visible, it becomes
Mhm.
a tracing, as he's using,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And
Well put.
so
Well put. Well.
nothing that is an active part of the network is
Mhm.
ever going, it will by its visibility,
Mhm.
it is active, and by its activity, it is helping to define or
Mhm.
trace the network.
Mhm. Well said. I think we probably have had, maybe we'll have another engagement with this essay or another example of actor
It's
network
funny because
theory
it's
in our next
deceptively
episode.
dense. It really
It
is
is. It
deceptively
is.
dense.
I could see us taking another pass at this. Well, Michael and I had already discussed talking about John Law, another ant theorist, and maybe explicating that. But
Yeah, I don't I
we might linger on this topic one way or
we are certainly I can't we are not done with actor network theory. I don't know that we're going to give it the Adorno and Horkheimer treatment, but by
the
God,
10 episode
I think we have to come
special.
back to this. Let me ask you a question because I have my thoughts on this that I'll share in a moment. But
Mhm,
what's if we pause here?
mhm.
What's the takeaway from actor network theory? Like, what does it let us do in terms of what we're doing on the podcast, like this, the critical media studies project? How does this inform the way that we want to talk about the internet or we want to talk about media?
I'm gonna I'm gonna try to answer that question. And
Mm-hmm.
as I answer that question, I'm going to tell you what I don't like about Latour.
Okay.
Um, Not because and don't like about Latour is really reductive. Um, it is just my awareness. A more precise way of saying it would be I am aware of something that he consciously omits
Okay.
as I see in this essay, as we kind of made clear in this essay. He's so conscious about what he's leaving out of the system and what he wants to exclude from actor network theory. And so, I can't say, man, Bruno, you didn't figure this out. He's figured it out. He knows what he's doing, obviously. But for me, I find it an omission. He finds it a necessary clarification, and I find it an omission. So let me, now that I did this meaningless rambling preamble, I'm going to try to answer your questions more succinctly. So what do you get? Your question was, what do we get from doing this, right?
Yeah.
In terms of purchase on media?
Yeah.
I think what actor network theory would now, and help me with this, but what I think it would help us do is rather than talk about, say, political or economic factors changing or creating technological habitus or media environments, it would encourage us to do microanalysis of how humans nuance, I won't say micro, but local, very specific, detailed analysis of humans within the network, the literal network that they're engaging
Mm-hmm.
with their tools. So that I think is what he's doing is that one needn't talk about and I think I can tell you what I don't like, or what I was saying I don't like about Latour. Because I understand him wanting to, as I understand it, he wants to consciously exclude these things. So I'm going to, I'll use another example from a prior episode, the Jonathan Crary episode. Jonathan Crary seems to be the anti-ant. He wants to explain the internet by talking about social and political factors. So he points out ways in which capitalized ownership or multinational ownership of the means of communication necessarily prioritize the creation of a consumerist subject. And if the creation of a consumerist subject through the internet is your goal, is the goal of Google and everybody, then guess what? You're not going to sleep because it's more important for you to be buying and working so you can buy stuff. It's more important for you to be that subject. Technology is there to create that kind of that mode of being in the world. If that's the point of the technology, that's the purpose of the technology. Um, then you're going to be encouraged. You're going to find yourself in a system where you can buy things 24/7 and you don't sleep because sleeping is less important. It's a lower priority than buying things. So, in other words, like Crary's approach to technology is that he believes in society. He thinks there is a capitalist society. He thinks there is a regnant consumer society. And then using that social history or that social context, he explains technology. Uh, as I understand it, Latour doesn't want to use these big words like capitalism, Marxism, consumerism, because he feels that's giving the game away. You don't pay attention to the network if you already have a social. I think this is what he meant by saying, I don't want to talk about social networks. I want to talk about the network and the actor in the network.
Is it that, or is it that if we ascribe a certain capitalism, so, like, an ism,
You're
these
giving it an agency. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly,
He doesn't
you're
like it. He doesn't
no,
want
well,
that.
you
Yeah,
can't because it violates the terms of Ant.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that, okay, I get that, but at the same time, and I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just trying to understand your answer. It seems that,
I'm not being critical. In a way, I'm saying I like oranges and he's making an apple. He's very clear that he wants
yeah,
an apple.
okay,
And
that's
he's
fine.
making the case to having an apple. He's making the case in this essay that apples are damn fine fruit.
And you
And I
just,
can't really argue with that,
right.
you know.
So that, yeah, okay, I understand your answer
Is
better.
that a little bit, like I said, I because I am that kind of guy, I out of the gate I say I don't like this, but that does him a disservice, and that's not really what I mean. Um, it's that he is interested in it. Listen, one thing you can't do, and I think he persuades me on it. Let me mention a major concession that I would make
Mm-hmm.
to our friend Bruno Latour. Um, he persuades me that if I want to do history of science, I'm going to have to do Ant, and I can't just do what I can't just talk about Marxism, consumerism, capitalism, blah, 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 and put that in the subject of a sentence and say I've explained history of science.
See,
I'm going to lose a lot of density and a lot of detail in my interpretation.
I
He
like,
convinces me about that.
I didn't, when you first said it, I didn't like what you said, but now I'm, I like your answer quite a bit because I think that one of the problems with Ant, or let me rephrase that, one of the hurdles to clear with Ant is that it renders a lot of the rubrics that we have, the heuristics that we have, incompatible in the sense that so much of this is laden with human intentionality at the core.
Right. Right.
That it's really a poor fit for a lot of social investigations because you can't investigate with the human and consciousness at the core,
At
and
the core.
that's really problematic. One of the things I love, and I feel the need to say it, is that uh it's no secret that you and I are huge fans of McLuhan, of Marshall McLuhan, and the medium is the message, or the medium is the mass age. And
Mm-hmm.
what I love about Ant is that it lets us look at the medium as a series of networks or as a network. And then if we look at that, right, because
Mm-hmm.
the medium isn't human, there's no,
Mm-hmm.
we partake
Mm-hmm.
in it, but
Absolutely.
we're
Absolutely.
passive
Right.
in that for the most part.
Absolutely.
That
It's
it let
constructing us. It's constructing us.
it
It's
is.
limiting
And
our agency.
so
Right.
this is an update to McLuhan, in the
Absolutely.
sense that the tracings of these networks, that the networks themselves do by existing, reveal the message. So I think this is kind of a cool, different way of like sort of sliding into McLuhan from a different perspective. And I just think that's profoundly cool. I like
Yeah,
that.
and that's a good way to end. I'm just going to tack on a little thing about McLuhan in relation to what you just said, but I think that's a perfect way
Sure.
to close our discussion. I just add one little thing, which is if you cast your memory back to our earliest episodes when we were reading interviews, especially his sort of public statements, less the critical writing than his like interviews, the Playboy interview, for example,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we talked about, and other things we read where he was sort of talking about his theory in general terms and trying to explain it to laypersons, oftentimes the interviewer would ask a question like this: is technology, it's evil, isn't it? Aren't you really saying that technology is evil? And McLuhan would, and this I think is a definite sort of precursor to anticipation of Latour, or this is one place where McLuhan totally intersects with Latour, is that McLuhan's answer to that is to absolutely, he always, when somebody gave him posed the ethical question, like, if this is hurting and changing our brains, this is really reformatting our brains, shouldn't we like destroy all technology? Don't we have to go back? And he would always say, systematic, all the time he would say, that's not my job.
Well,
to
and
talk
that's
about
that's
that.
the point, right?
My job is to describe what's going on. My job is not to say it's good or bad. And
no,
that is like Latour.
it is, because it's hurting and changing are two very different things from this perspective. Has it changed? Sure, networks change. Has it hurt? Well, hurt is a question of prioritization, and that doesn't work.
They're concerned to bracket off certain questions about the ethical intent, or the, like Crary, as we talk. I mean, Crary was a sort of grumpy old man who, and I say that as a grumpy old man.
We've been accused of being grumpy old
Yeah,
men,
yeah,
so.
and of course, as you know, so he's a moralist, a better way of putting it, and a more honorable, honorific. Um, he's a moralist about this. He feels there's something immoral about the ways in which, in his view, technology is turning us into these, kind of desubjectifying.
Yeah,
So
it's
he's against it, and he's writing as a moralist, as an outraged moralist. That's not Latour. That's not McLuhan.
no, and I think that's probably the takeaway, is this is agnostic, and that's going to create problems when you try and pair it with overtly social concerns, because you're not going to get that answer. Barry, this was a delightful mess. I don't even, I got to step away to think about how we're going to clean it up. But thank you for really an engaging conversation. I suspect we'll be coming back to this one.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you as always. And
all right,
take care and have a wonderful evening.
You do the same.
Thanks for listening to the Critical Media Studies podcast. To find out more about the show, check out our webpage at criticalmediastudiespodcast.com.